women are the most vulnerable within the time of crisis.
Like wearing masks, social distancing, zeroing or true testing on where are the cases.
Ja, jag har suttit och glott igenom såna här långa, astråkiga panelprat och skit från Ajemeff nu. Och det är från 2 stycken, men jag har klippt ur godbitarna så ni slipper glo. Det handlar såklart om The Great Reset och alla möjligheter vi har att kunna jobba tillsammans globalt och hur viktigt det är att vi är globala. Och att makten centraliseras. Det gör man då i skydd av corona. För att dölja då det ekonomiska haveriet och så vidare. Och för att kunna då göra den här slutgiltiga övertagandet och förslava mänskligheten. Det handlar såklart om klimat som vanligt. Det handlar om vaccin. Det handlar om gender. Alla de där grejerna vävs samman då, och man kommer ju då såklart fram till att det behövs global beskattning. Förut har det ju alltid handlat om att klimatet är ju en sån här global företeelse som måste behandlas globalt med en global skatt. Och nu då i och med den nya Great Reset-ekonomin som vi har pratat om i tidigare videos. World Economic Forum och de där som pratar mycket om det kan ni kolla upp, fast det har ni säkert redan gjort eftersom det är bara intresserade som kollar på min kanal. Så jag räknar inte med att det är någon direkt ny som sitter här och kollar som inte redan känner till de här sakerna. Men det nya är då att, eller nya, men de pratar om digital beskattning, och det rör ju då allt som har med den nya digitala ekonomin att göra. Allt från annonseringar till digitala finansiella instrument och tillgångar i form av kryptovalutor och även deras egna centralbankspengar då, CBDCs och allt det där skiten. Så ni får bara sitta och titta så bilda en egen uppfattning och se ungefär åt vilket håll det lutar liksom. Men det är lite intressant att de kör den här kvinnovinkeln på det hela. Jag vet inte hur de har tänkt att det ska, vad det ska leda till. Vi vill ju alla såklart att kvinnor ska ha det minst lika bra som män och att det ska vara jämlikt. Det är inte det jag säger, att jag är emot att kvinnor ska ha det bättre. Men jag undrar vad de egentligen är ute efter här. Så det får ni kolla och återkom gärna med kommentarer som vanligt. Det är spännande. Den är inte så genomproducerad den här lilla videosnutten, utan det är bara hopklippt för att det tar sån jävla tid att göra de här längre, vad ska man säga, spånerierna som jag gjort förut. Det blir nästan som att dra upp små dokumentärfilmer, även fast jag samlar klipp från nätet bara och pratar lite om det. Men det tar en jävla tid att göra dem där, och jag har inte haft den tiden nu. För jag har gjort massa andra grejer som det kommer snart. Jag ska visa snart några projekt jag jobbat på. Jag skulle gärna göra dem där mer. För jag tror att de är ganska bra och intressanta att göra. Men jag når ju ut så jävla lite så att det blir lite så här. Ja, jag vet inte. Kanske inte finns så stort intresse, och då känns det lite så här halvkul att göra det för 100 pers liksom. Men ja, och varav hälften kanske kollar på dem max. Så det tar lite mer energi än vad det utväxlingen blir liksom. Så det är lite frustrerande. Man vill ju på något sätt hjälpa till här, men jag vet inte hur man ska göra det riktigt. Det är svårt. Så, men jag återkommer med några andra projekt som kanske är mer bättre på det området. Jag vet inte. Hur som helst så kolla igenom det här och have fun, eller vad man ska säga. Hej.
From Washington, D.C., Ajemeff Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. Live from Frankfurt, ECB President Christine Lagarde. In Jakarta, Indonesian Finance Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati. And coming to us live from Geneva, Gavi Board Chair Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Thank you all for joining us here. So I just want to start with a reality check. Let's take stock for a moment, Managing Director. The IMF says in its World Economic Outlook we're seeing a modest improvement in the growth path here, but we have no US stimulus agreement. We just had a terrible weekly jobless claims number from the United States. We have no Brexit agreement. We have no vaccine. And importantly, infections are rising. I never thought I'd actually say this, but is there a possibility that your negative 4.4% for the global economy for this year is actually starting to look over-optimistic?
Thank you, Jeff. First, for bringing gender diversity to our panel, much appreciated. And let me go to your question. Minus 4.4% is less dire than we saw it 3 months ago, but dire nonetheless. For all the reasons you brought up, we face incredible uncertainty, and in that uncertainty, we have to zero on what policymakers can do so we can underpin recovery and come on the other side of this crisis. And what is it that we concentrate on? You put your finger on the most important action, which is health. Let's give ourselves some credit. We have learned how to function with the pandemic still around us by applying simple measures like wearing masks, social distancing, zeroing or true testing on where are the cases. It is going to come on the other side of 2020 with positive growth until we have vaccines and or effective treatment. We are not out of the health crisis, and the uncertainty would be still with us. Everything we can do to apply measures that reduce the impact of the pandemic, even before vaccines, we must do. And then secondly, we ought to work together.
From this corner of the world in Europe, we're seeing, recurrences of contagion. We're seeing maybe a second wave on the horizon or hitting the coastline of Europe, and we'd better make sure that all the arsenal that we have available is actually dealing with this situation by adopting the right policies.
Let's focus on the pandemic for a moment here, more specifically. Dr. Ngozi, if I could come to you, how concerned are you by the recent Eli Lilly and J&J suspension of vaccine trials? Do we now need to, in all reality, push the vaccine expectations to the end of 2021 now?
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I just want to echo what Christine just said and Kristalina. I think the first and most important thing about this pandemic is health and saving lives. And so it's true that we've had this suspension, but I don't think we should become too pessimistic about the possibility of life-saving vaccines or therapeutics or diagnostics coming on stream. And I think the hope that perhaps by the first quarter of next year to the middle of next year, we would have something that works. I think that we should keep that hope. Of course, vaccines are not a magic bullet, and we can't guarantee, but the work that is going on so far looks very promising.
But the suspensions suggest that there are more challenges than perhaps we initially thought.
Probably, there may be, but remember that right now, let me speak about the COVAX facility and the work we're doing with the WHO, Gavi, and CEPI in the biggest solidarity effort on the health side. It's called the ACT Accelerator, which is an effort to accelerate the use of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics.
Not all can be saved, and actually some of the structural changes that we're seeing mean some actually shouldn't be.
It is very clear that the post-pandemic economy would be very different from the pre-pandemic economy. And we ought to celebrate the innovation and the capacity of us to adapt to fast-changing environments as we mourn the people we lost and the suffering this pandemic has caused. We see the digital economy being a big winner of the crisis, and we know that when we come on the other side, digitalization is going to be embraced as a big advantage for the economy in the future. We are going to pour massive fiscal stimulus to continue to support the economy in the months to come. And already, as your question actually indicates, there is thinking about using the stimulus in a more targeted manner. Of course, in the first months, all that mattered was to prevent bankruptcies and prevent massive unemployment, and rightly so. The economy was in a standstill. Now, as we are gradually reopening, the measures that are being applied will also shift more towards supporting the workers rather than uniformly supporting the firms. But also, I would stress, this is a chance for us to build higher productivity, to build a greener economy, one that can withstand the other crisis knocking on the door, the climate crisis. Makes no sense to use money today to invest in the economy of yesterday. We ought to invest in the economy of tomorrow. We are on the view that some progressivity in taxation and also reshaping taxation towards the shape of the economy of tomorrow would be necessary and would be positive for societies. We also would like to see very much concentration on quality of spending. So a moment of transformation not to be missed.
Well, you raised the issue of taxation, so let me ask you, is it time that regardless of the views of the world's two tech leaders, the United States and China, the rest of the world pushes ahead with a digital tax, whether they like it or not?
Jeff, I'm an optimist, and I believe that ultimately there would be a multilateral solution to digital taxation. So I'm disappointed it hasn't yet arrived, but I'm encouraged that the discussions continue. It would be the optimal solution to have digital taxation that is applied universally globally. And let's not give up on getting to this optimal solution, because indeed, if it doesn't come in a way that is internationally accepted, it would come in a piecemeal manner, and we will have to then fix it because it would not be the best solution for the world. So let's keep fingers crossed. The work continues. OECD has done a really good job, and G20 hasn't thrown the towel just yet.
I'm also want to endorse what Kristalina mentioned earlier, that this is also a good time for us to design the recovery path, which is not just restoring growth, but we have to look at the gender lens. So for example, most of the social safety net and small medium enterprise support, they are going to benefiting women. Don't forget that COVID is hit mostly for the women. Most of the health worker they are usually also women. So this is all going to be very, very vulnerable for many of the women in many countries, which is going to also need to be supported timely and effectively. Second one is also related to climate change. We can design the reform as well as the recovery path by putting the climate change in our design in order for us to be able to continue growing without emissioning the carbon which is need to be avoided. And that can be done with the fiscal stimulus, or in this case incentive, that is providing a signal for more renewable and greener project. The coronavirus or COVID is all country problem. It cannot be solved by only one single country or one region. All countries need to be also in a table to be able to address this issue. And that's why the collaboration at the international level is going to be very critical.
Which brings me neatly back to the managing director, because clearly leadership matters for the bold action that you have all outlined is necessary during this panel to deal with the debt, to deal with the pandemic, to deal with inequality, to deal with carbon reduction. So, Managing Director, let me ask you, how pivotal for the reset and for the bold action for all of these things is the outcome of the election in the United States in 3 weeks' time?
Let me say that we have seen an incredible mobilization, and everything that has been done in these last months to sustain the economy that could have collapsed is done because all countries come together. And we have seen a remarkable attention to the both negative and positive spillovers of domestic actions. In fact, what we saw in the United States in the first stimulus was in the $2 trillion to plug in support for the Ajemeff, so we can do on a massive scale support for other countries. And in that sense, I think that we will see continuing on the same path, because one, very clearly vaccine policy is an economic policy. And it can only work if it works everywhere. We actually calculated, being the Ajemeff and crunching numbers, that if we have an accelerated vaccine everywhere, not patchily here and there, by 2025, we will generate additional $9 trillion just by doing something that would be done together rather than separately. So I think we will see that course of action. And two, what we recognize today is that unless we are all coming together, we might see a very dangerous scarring for the world.
As we all indicated, many people stepped up to the plate. And in a funny way, while separating us, this virus has brought us together because we were all in it and all confronting the same issue. I just hope that vaccination is not going to divide us. And on that particular front, I think that while there has been a lot of criticism about globalization, about international trade governed by WTO, clearly trade is picking up. Trade is working. There's a degree of stabilization that is coming about. When you look at certain numbers in terms of manufacturing being up, import and export picking up as well in various places, particularly those that are now coming out of this pandemic. So we don't know whether globalization is going to continue to expand, but let's recognize that it has served us reasonably well most recently. And when it was a question of delivering masks, of receiving therapy, of trading amongst ourselves and picking up again on that, it has been a good thing. So let's not just draw the conclusions that is going to be everyone for himself, that is going to be protectionism all over again, that is going to be this war or the other. And let's look at how we can, as we have been brought together by this virus, also be brought together by this vaccination. And I would like to salute the work that Ngozi is doing in that respect, because clearly it has to be not just for some who can afford it and who can sort of book their ticket first, but it has to be for all. And hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate that we are in this together and will stay together, including through vaccination.
What would it mean for us to do our part to help the world not just go through this crisis, but come on the other side as a greener, fairer, and more sustainable, more inclusive, more resilient world? And on all this, we count on you. On your eyes and ears on what is happening on the ground. And you are putting pressure, including on us, to do the right thing. So over time, what we want is to see a modernization of tax systems that allow us to get more revenues by not only distributing the debt responsibilities in a more equitable manner. We are faced with a very dangerous climb up of inequalities of all kinds. Among them, gender inequality. What we have made as progress over the last decades can be easily lost. We know this crisis hits women more than it hits men. They are more in the contact-dependent sectors. They do most of the work at home, as you said, and now the work at home has increased. They are being cut off labor markets more than men. And unfortunately, we see gender-based violence going up. We, first and foremost, need gender disaggregated data. Women have to be visible. Melinda Gates talks a lot about it. We are going to have an event with her on this topic. And then secondly, we need policies that zero on reducing inequality, including gender inequality. And where the fund has a role to play is in making sure that we have gender-based budgeting, that access to finance is actually prioritizes women. We know, especially in SMEs, women are more reliable. We know women in many places are better business people. Actually, in some parts of the world, evidence shows that women outperform men as entrepreneurs, and yet that they have many times less access to finance. So we have to be fixing these problems. And of course, there are very important issues on public spending in terms of childcare, easing the burden on everybody, but especially on women. And do speak up about it. I personally believe that we empower women, we would get faster through this crisis. By the way, another piece of news. The first woman to lead a multilateral development bank was appointed yesterday. Odile is now the president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The community of women in finance is growing.
Thank you, Kristalina. Good news.
Taxation, yes, we believe that there is space for making the tax burden more equitably shared. There are many who say, oh, if you go into more redistributional impact of taxation, that would impact growth. In most cases, this is simply not true. And we want to see thinking of taxation in a way that helps the world, helps the economy transition, including to low carbon, climate resilient development. What terminology we use, that is a separate matter, and of course we can define the terms, but the concept of sharing the benefits and the risks in a more effective way than we do today, this concept clearly has to be put front and center. And in our engagement with the membership, we do make this case very, very clearly. Taxation needs to be brought up in the 21st century. There are parts of the economy that didn't exist before. Now they're the drivers of growth. And yet, how do we deal with digital taxation? This is a very open question. So it's not only about different income levels, it is also about the structural change in the economy and taxation not yet quite catching up. So it basically says we need a triage, we need three things. We need to use the stimulus that is going to be deployed to prop up the economy, to be a green stimulus to direct money into low carbon intensity transition. Second, we need to have forward guidance on carbon price, with gradually increasing a carbon price as a signal to move out of high carbon intensity to low carbon intensity. And third, it has to be a just transition. We have to use part of the revenues from carbon to direct to sectors and people that are negatively impacted. Now, this is the framework, and then what we want is in surveillance.
Ja, det här med global beskattning, det är ju som exempelvis då klimatet. Jag kan tänka mig att det finns många som tänker att så här, ja, de ska fan betala för att de skitar ner och förstör vår jord. Så man har en liten sån här straffande känsla inför det. Okej. Men frågan är, om man nu ska ta in skatt globalt, så efter att man då har fått straffbetala då blir det ju liksom en liten hög med pengar där. Och vad ska man göra av den? Vart ska de pengarna gå? Ska det delas ut då till kanske klimatvänliga projekt då? Eller företag? Eller hur ska det fungera? Samma sak med alla de här andra områdena som man då kan ta in global skatt på. Så helt plötsligt så blir allting politik. Helt plötsligt så behövs då den här globala kroppen som då ska bestämma vart pengarna går. Och då är vi inne, då är det politik och ideologi helt plötsligt. Men här har man liksom redan bestämt ideologin. Den är redan färdig. Så det är ju problematiskt, kan man ju säga. Och den digitala ekonomin, ja, det är ju bara ett sätt att, ytterligare ett sätt att nästlas in här och kunna sno från folk som försöker bygga upp saker och ting. Och en digital ekonomi, det innefattar ju väldigt mycket saker. Mer än bara liksom den finansiella fintech-delen, utan det är ju även liksom, liksom musik, Spotify, världen, hela det, och annonsering på nätet och podcasting, om det är någon som tar betalt för att sälja podcast. Det är ju för sig redan beskattat liksom i respektive länder och sådär. Men sen är det också att du kan, i och med att du inte behöver vara fysiskt på plats, så kan du ju liksom köra din skatt i ett annat land genom att vara registrerad på sådana här skatteparadis och grejer. Det är väl sånt man vill komma åt också då. Fast det är lite så att de som styr det här, de har ju redan allt det där för sig själva. Men det är bara att de vill inte att någon annan också ska kunna slippa skatt. Utan det ska bara de göra. Ja, lite sådana tankar jag har kring det här. Vad har ni för tankar om det hela? Och i och med att man behöver ett globalt organ som samlar in global skatt, så behöver man en global bank, och så behöver man en global regering. Och har man en global regering så behöver man kunna sköta lagar globalt. Då behöver man en global domstol. Och för att kunna utföra lagsaker så behöver man en global polis, och så vidare, och så vidare. Och där har vi världsregeringen, det vill säga dystopin som vi har sett i åtskilliga science fiction-filmer, fast på riktigt, och väldigt nära just nu. Väldigt nära. Det här är deras takeover. Den håller på precis just nu. Mitt framför ögonen på allihopa. Det är många som vaknar till, men det är jävligt många som inte ser någonting heller. Så jag vet inte, ibland känns det lite hopplöst. Samtidigt som det känns väldigt hoppfullt också. Jag tror inte de kommer lyckas i slutändan. Det är bara en fråga om hur jävligt det ska bli innan de faller. Och om man själv ska stryka med på kuppen, liksom. Men då kanske i alla fall ungarna får det bättre. Man får väl vara beredd på att offra sig, liksom. Ja. It's all good. Ha det fint allihopa. Hej. Och tål emot.